Before you bring it up, please.
Good morning, Chairman Marston, members of the Commission. My name is Jermaine Kawuchi. I'm the Hawaii County Clerk. I'm here today to testify concerning item 5, discussion and review of the County of Hawaii 2012 general election, to include recommendations for future elections held in that county. It's my strong recommendation that the state again return its delegation of authority to run its election as well as Hawaii County elections to the County of Hawaii. We have the adequate staffing and resources to handle the elections going forward, in particular going into the 2012 election year. I would like to tell you that when the state revoked its delegation of authority for the general election, that was not done with my consent. It was not by mutual consent. We had begun preparations to prepare for that general election, and the state had revoked its delegation without consulting with us prior to. We were notified on October 2nd, a scant 30 days prior to that election, that our responsibilities for that election would be changing. And at that time, I did not make a significant amount of protest concerning that because I did not feel that that was in the best interest of the electorate or the voters. But as now the election has concluded and obviously the challenge period has passed, it's now time for me, I think, to be able to tell you that that disruption in services, I believe, was very negative, and the approach that was used was also very negative and indicative of the approach that had been used with Hawaii County for the past, in the previous 12 months that we had been preparing for elections. As you may recall, some of the commissioners who were here at the time, I see that there are some new faces here. The Hawaii County clerk, myself, had submitted to this commission a statement concerning my concerns regarding the ability and the methods and the ways that the Office of Elections have been running, and that had been done in November 2011. It's my understanding that none of the items that I expressed as concerns had been addressed by the Chief Election Officer, and those problems had persisted going into the 2012 election cycle. It is also disturbing for me to note that the Chief Election Officer also inserted himself into the process of a personnel matter within Hawaii County. There were employees that he requested to be reinstated, and he sent a letter to Mayor William T. Kanoy concerning this in April 2012. His letter, if I can paraphrase and summarize, had stated that without those workers, there would be serious mishaps and problems with the elections process. And again, I have to tell you that that was done in his personal capacity and not in his official capacity as Chief Election Officer. But in my opinion, there's no distinction between himself and that office, and it seems as though he was wearing the mantle of his position in order to advocate for certain personnel matters to occur, and had stated so in a way that seemed as if they were not hired or rehired again, that there would be a serious election problem. I came before this commission in May 2012, and I was intensely questioned concerning the preparations that we were undertaking for the primary and general election, and I assured this commission that would be fine. And all seemed to have been going well, and according to plan, we had met all of our targeted goals that we needed to prior to the primary election. And in fact, our office came up with an election readiness report. We held a press conference in Hawaii County concerning all of our preparations, and this report was prepared in July of 2012, and everything seems to have been going according to plan. We developed issues and problems approximately, a couple weeks prior to the election, the primary election, where we had staffing, a large number of staff which were not at our office, who were not able to help, and that then also coupled with failed deliveries in West Hawaii, in Hawaii County on election day, contributed to election irregularities, which then resulted in the issuance by Governor Abercrombie of an election day proclamation requesting and actually ordering that election precincts stay open and remain open in order to allow people to vote. Again, the basis of that proclamation were unforeseen circumstances and an emergency situation. Governor recognized that that was what was happening. So what we had done to prepare in Hawaii County for the primary election, in my opinion, was very good. All was well. One thing I think that's very, very important to note is that although that election was a concurrent election, responsibilities were borne by both the county and by the state. It appeared as though the state didn't want to take, the Office of Elections didn't want to take any responsibility for any contribution it may have had to the running of that election. And that is a significant problem. Another significant problem is our office was under constant attack I need to step back a little bit. In about early July of 2012, our office conducted an audit of the voter registration list. And in that audit, which I believe had never been performed before in the state, we discovered duplicate names registered in our voter registration list, which we were attempting to clean up following the redistricting and reassignment process, where we assigned voters in Hawaii County from their old districts to their new districts. So as part of that process, in order to make sure that we had a clean list where we crossed our T's and dotted our I's, we went ahead and performed a review and did determine that there were irregularities in our voter registration list, which we cleaned up. We had also found that there were possible instances of double voting in the previous election by persons who had been listed twice in the registration. So we wanted to make sure that we didn't put any of the public, any of the voters at risk of having an unforeseen or inadvertent problem at the polls, and wanted to make sure that we ourselves were policing ourselves appropriately. That, I cannot tell you in enough words how we in our county had experienced an unprecedented amount of media coverage concerning that audit. It was unbelievable. I mean, for doing something that we thought was right, where we thought we were doing the right thing by making sure that our registration list is clean and adequate and protecting the rights of voters, we were attacked. And a lot of the communications that were coming to me late and were going to media first. And I had, again, in November 2011, had indicated a severe problem with communication with the State Office of Election. Part of that severe problem is the fact that they kept going to the media before they would come to us, which threw us off and didn't allow us an opportunity to be able to respond to them with enough time in order to get things out to the public. And that put us at a severe disadvantage, and I cannot explain to you why somebody would choose to do that, but it was, I think, unprofessional. Yes?
Who went to the media?
Say one more time, sorry. Who went to the media? The State Office of Elections was issuing letters that were then directed to the media, and in some cases before I even saw it.
I hear a lot of I's.
Yes.
When you say I, you mean read?
Well, any action that's taken in this matter, I believe, is directed to Hawaii County.
No, but I hear a lot of I's. This is a read.
Mm-hmm.
You're an I.
No, I represent the county of Hawaii. So, again, unprecedented media coverage, something that we thought we were doing right, and then that began a series of questions that kept relating to our office, and we would get a lot of media attention for things that, again, I believe were getting directed to media before they got directed to us. Okay, so going back to the primary, again, serious irregularities. I took responsibility, I still take responsibility for the failures for a primary election on the Big Island, but I cannot take full responsibility for that. It's a concurrent election, and the responsibility is borne by both the state and by the county. Now, after the primary election, we took steps to correct problems. We met with election precinct workers. We were working with the state in order to correct any materials, supplies, communication problems. You have to understand too, we left Hawaii County offices primary election day on August 12th at 5:38 in the morning. I returned to the building at 11 a.m. that day, and I didn't leave for 2 days. And the reason why I didn't leave is because I wanted to look through all the materials that came back, and I wanted to make sure that I understood very well what had happened in our county. And I have gathered enough information to understand where the problems were. But it still requires a more thorough investigation by an outside party, an outside investigator, in order to take a look at what happened at the primary election and to make sure it doesn't happen again. Okay. Now I'm glad to see that, we were again working with the state, working toward preparations for the general election. Things were going smoothly. And all of a sudden, on October 2nd, I get a call saying we're going to revoke our delegation authority. At the same day, a press conference, my understanding, a press conference was held. I was not invited to attend. Obviously, this was a great disruption to the staff, to the county, and the way that was handled, I think, was grossly inappropriate. And again, in order to restore faith to the electorate and to make sure that voters felt comfortable with what was happening, obviously, by state law, the state office of elections, the chief election officer, has the right to revoke that delegation. So I didn't consent to it, but I also thought the best thing to do for the public is to just let it go. Because if I fought it too much, it would have resulted in a lot of problems and a lot of, I think, disturbance to the public. So we went ahead with the general. We continued to provide support to the state and state office elections and chief election officer in order to have the best election that we could. And we had a good election. There were problems with the election. I notified the state of one problem in West Hawaii, in one of the precincts, the Kapakai precinct, where there was a person who had volunteered, my understanding, had volunteered to serve as a poll book worker, and who were signing in people who may not have been registered to vote. That was what was reported to me. So we contacted the state, the program administrator who came down to handle the general election for the state. We communicated, I talked to her, the problem was taken care of for that day. But I still wanted to inspect the record books and the poll books to make sure I understood what was going on in the county on that day after the election. I never got a chance to look at those materials because the state has never gotten back to me to tell me when I can take a look at those materials. And I have to remind you again, this is a concurrent election. The county of Hawaii ought to have had the opportunity and still have the opportunity to inspect all the election materials if we choose to do so. So the fact that I've never gotten word back from the state, I think is not acceptable. Now, also, there was another report that I received about 2 weeks ago of duplicate voting in Hawaii County. One instance of duplicate voting. Now, that matter was brought to me. The precinct person had made sure that that record of duplicate voting or alleged duplicate voting had been recorded into the record books. Again, I was not allowed to inspect any of that. I brought that matter just recently to the attention of the chief election officer. I'm not sure what he's going to do to follow up, but what I did was, any case of duplicate voting, we're going to refer that to local law enforcement for follow-up, which is what I did, okay? So, and again, inspection of the poll books, I think is very important. Inspection of the record books is very important, and I have not had the opportunity to do that. An election is far past already, okay? I need to tell you that the running of the election, general election in Hawaii County by the state and by the county together, helping each other, did go well. But going forward, I want to tell you that Hawaii County, again, has the adequate staffing and resources to be able to hold, host, and handle an election, any election going forward in our county. And that we were ready to do so before the state revoked its authority. One last matter I want to bring to your attention. It's kind of disturbing to me when we received these t-shirts from the state. I didn't notice it at first, but I need to bring this to your attention. This is a picture of a record book, okay? Now, if you might recall, there was controversy surrounding the removal of Hawaii County record books from the primary election. Okay, the state office elections had said that they confiscated the books. I didn't even know that they were gone from our county. I knew that we didn't have them because I spent 2 days at the county building researching what had happened at the primary election. I knew we didn't have them, but I wasn't sure where they had gone. Okay, I found out later that the state had taken them. Now, the record book is displayed on these t-shirts. These t-shirts were made for the general election. Hawaii County is marked off on the t-shirt, County of Hawaii, and the polling place is mine. This is my polling place. Now, you're gonna need to tell me, somebody should explain to me why it is that they would choose to do this. And the caption on it says, "One for the record books." So, you know, I want to understand whether or not the extent of the chief elections officer's attacks were so personal as to go this far. Because if they were, I think this really needs to be addressed and very seriously addressed. So I can leave this with you.
Thanks, Tia.
Sure.
So all the elections of workers have that shirt on,
All of the people that worked in Control Center had.
What is control center?
Control Center is a portion of an election operation.
Is that open to the public or is that an inside thing?
Well,
They
our
see
office
the
was
public?
open to the public that day because we were receiving absentee ballots from the public that day.
So what should be on the shirt again?
The shirt is the record book,
No,
which
what is your
mentioned-
position as to what?
I'm trying to explain that if you let me answer, Chairman. May I answer the question?
Sure.
Thank you. The record book was a source of controversy in the primary election. The record books had disappeared. It was a big issue, whether or not they had been confiscated, removed without our permission, or not. The county that's depicted on the record book is Hawaii County. The polling place is my personal polling place. Now, the question I have is, you might be able to explain that Hawaii County is the first county that's listed on the list. So, you know, you could choose that. The polling place, however, is not the first polling place in the list of polling places, it's the fifth. So the question is, why was my polling place selected to be depicted on that record, on that t-shirt? That's the question. That is what I'd like you to